Our guests today know about the power of sport. Brothers BK and Paul Waldo came to Canada as refugees from Eritrea when they were just boys. Both went on to play elite level football. BK with the Regina Rams, and Paul is a 3-time Grey Cup champion with the Montreal Alouettes and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Now, they're trying to help the next generation of young refugee athletes. BK and Paul, thanks so much for coming into the show today. I just realized I skipped my entire intro, and the technical producer behind the board is going, what is she doing? I'm just going to keep going and welcome you guys to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're just going. It's a Monday, you guys. It's a Monday. Also with us in studio is Victoria Flores. She's a Regina City Councillor, but she is also with the Regina Open Door Society. She has been here before. It's a settlement agency helping support new immigrants and refugees, and they've been working with the Waldos and other founders of Bring 'em Up Saskatchewan to reduce some barriers to sport. Victoria, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, today we are talking about sports and barriers into sport. I jumped the gun on that entirely. We're going to learn about Bring 'em Up Sask and the founders who are going to share their stories, and we're going to learn about the work being done by the Regina Open Door Society and Saskatchewan Sport. We also want to hear from you today. What difference has being involved in sport made in your life? You can call us 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. So before we get into the Bring 'em Up Saskatchewan initiative, I want to learn more about the Waldo family. BK, what brought you guys to Canada?
So I was born in Ethiopia. The two countries used to be one. Mm-hmm. War broke out in the mid-'70s, and my dad happened to be a colonel in the Ethiopian army.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So when the war broke out, my mom's Eritrean. My dad wanted nothing to do with this war, so he wanted to get out.
That's hard when you're in the army.
Correct. So he wanted to get out. He knew too much. He was high up in the army, so he had two choices, and one choice was either to go to jail or stay in the army.
What did he do?
So he fled. He fled the country from Eritrea. He went to Sudan. So meanwhile, my mom and I would have been, I guess, a 3-year-old at the time. He hid us in Eritrea with friends, relatives, and the connections that he had, and he fled to Sudan. From Sudan, he got sponsored to come. He went to France. From France, he got sponsored to Regina. Meanwhile, now the trick is how does he get us out of Eritrea to get us to meet him in Canada? So with the connections that he had, he paid some people to get us out. So my mom and I fled. So I was 6 years old at the time. We fled by camel through the desert.
Gosh. Do you remember any of this?
You know, I was too young to remember majority of this. But we fled through camel jockeys is what they call them. And what we do is basically we would travel by night and then hide during the day.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So now...
With a 6-year-old.
6-year-old, yeah. So the reason why you travel by night, one's obviously...
Visibility.
The other one is heat. Mm. It's a little bit cooler at night. And then during the day, you just find a hiding spot, and you... usually in caves, believe it or not, and you would hide. So that took us a whole week to get to Sudan. Luckily, we made it safe and sound. Once we got to Sudan, we were there for 8 months while he was trying to get the paperwork to get us aboard to Canada.
What do you do for 8 months while you're in Sudan?
Luckily, my mom and dad had my dad had stepbrother that lived in Sudan at the time. So you
stayed with family?
Stayed with him.
Okay.
Again, in Sudan, you're hiding too because you're not actually supposed to be in the country. So 8 months goes by. We finally, he gets us to Regina, Saskatchewan, and that's when we met him in January of 1983. That's how we got to Canada.
And you were how old were you at that time when you finally got here?
By that time, I would have been about 7.5.
And are there photos, or is this all just oral memory from your parents?
I got photos from Sudan that I would remember. But, I'll be honest with you, the memories now. So when I got to Canada, that's when now I know
That's your base.
that's my base. Now I do remember some parts, but I think it's basically from just storytelling, though. I think I remember, but I'm not really.
Those memories that just live in your head because of the stories your parents have
Correct.
told. Where do your brothers come into the story?
So my brothers,
They're twins.
Yeah. So from what I understanding, as soon as we got to Canada, my mom must have been pregnant. Well, I mean, got pregnant, obviously, and so they're born in 1983. 1984.
So you got there in 83 and they were born in 84. Correct. It was a very happy reunion for your parents.
I think so.
No time wasted.
Yeah.
So how did you first get involved in sport? Because you were about 7 years old at the time.
7, yeah.
What was your gateway into Canadian sports?
Wow, this is a good story. When we first got to Canada, my parents' biggest focus was study.
That's common of the immigrant experience,
100%,
right? We
right.
got you here, make the most of it.
Yeah, and luckily when we came to Canada, I had a neighbor by the name of Randy Shaw, who's a big guy in town. He's a football guy in town, and just God willing, he happened to be my neighbor. And God willing, he had a child, or his son Jeremy, which became my best friend, was into sports. So I would just, I would watch these kids play all these weird sports like baseball and this. And I had no clue. I only knew soccer. But I just kind of tag along with them and play. And Randy saw something in me that was, I'll be honest, I was a little faster than them and stronger than the kids. So, yeah, and I was. But I just didn't know any of these games. So Randy asked me, hey, do you want to play football? I said, absolutely.
Put me in, coach.
Put me in. So I asked, of course, he said, go talk to your parents. And the parents say, okay, you're good to go. So I went and asked my parents.
Is this touch football or tackle football?
No, tackle. There's no such thing as touch football back in those days.
Touch flag, that didn't exist.
Yeah,
Hey, the girls had touch football. When I was growing up, there was touch football for girls.
Yeah, but I'm 20 years older than you, don't forget.
You're only like 10 years older than me. But anyways, I digress.
So, of course, I asked.
So you get here, and now you're slamming your body into to other humans.
So, hey, listen to this. So I go to my mom and dad, and I'm like, hey, I want to play this football. My dad said, absolutely not. That football's for the animals, he called it. It's barbaric. You're not doing it. You're just going to school.
Because you're studying.
Yeah. So, of course, I went to Randy Shaw and I said, yep, my parents said I'm good to go. We'll play.
When did you get hurt for the first time?
No, never got hurt.
Really?
Yeah, knock on wood, never ever got hurt.
So when did you come clean to your parents that you were learning to play football?
Well, so basically, I would go to practice. I would hide my equipment in the bushes when I got home.
No.
I did.
BK.
I did. And not until, to be honest with you, not until probably midway through the season did my mom figured out something was going on. So she had a talk with Randy Shaw, and Randy just pleaded my case and said I was really good.
She didn't even come to you. She just knew.
She knew. Yeah. So
did he crumble like a house of cards?
Yeah. Yeah. He just. I told. Yeah. So he told her everything, and so therefore I started playing. I fell in love with this game. It's such a wonderful sport. And I ended up playing. Luckily, he coached me in Pee Wee. He ended up coaching me in Bantam, and then even in high school. When I went to Miller to play for the Miller Marauders, Randy Shaw had the connection, so he was coaching at that time. And I feel as though without him, I can honestly tell you my life could have gone a totally different direction, because the area that we lived in wasn't the best area in the world. How easy would it be to become friends with some guys that don't have any
not a good
value in
influence.
sports. And it could have just gone a totally different way.
You also could have been like a super nerdy engineer. You never know.
Well, I guess you've never seen my marks. No.
So, Paul, how did you get into sport?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't.
Were you watching your brother play football? Is this how it started?
That's exactly how it started. I think for Peter and I, it's different because we didn't escape any refugee camps, or we didn't have to go through a lot of things that he did, right? And I think he essentially would have probably softened the blow, because by the time he started to get pretty competitive and started to play football, my mom became a really big fan. So I always say he led the way for us. So he had to knock the barriers down. So growing up watching him play, and then he'd have me in the backyard doing drills, and have my brother and I and all the neighborhood kids actually playing sports all the time. So that's kind of where the love of the game probably started for me, and then it just progressed.
What position did you play?
I'll tell you. So when I was young, I was quite a lot bigger than the kids, so I played every position: quarterback, running back. I was just played every position. And then as we got older, I didn't grow as much, so I played defensive back. So I played corner.
And when you were younger, what did you play, Paul? What position did you play?
See, I was small. I was super small. I was a small kid. So kind of put me at the position all the way in the island at the defensive back position where there's not a lot of action, so that's kind of where it started for me. And then I always just kind of stayed there. So,
it turned into a career for you.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
It worked out okay with those 3 Grey Cup rings.
Yeah, it worked out.
Not terrible for you.
Right place, right timing.
So what do you think you got out of your involvement in sports, aside from, a really cool relationship with your mom?
Yeah, well, okay, this is, to me, sports in general has built my future. I always wonder, because I've had friends when I first came to Canada, a lot of them or some of them ended up, going the drug route or even some of them in jail and so on. My involvement in sports has made me who I am today. And honestly, it's given me a nice life. I could provide for my family. And I bet you 90% of the friends that I have or the connections that I have are due to some sort of sports involvement.
What about you? I mean, obviously, Paul, it was your career for a long time. But personally, what else did you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's, there's intangibles in the game of football or sports in general that you learn that you can't learn anywhere else. You know what I mean? Just the resilience, the adversity, and then you're dealing with 50, 60 different people, and some that you might not agree with or might not like, but you learn. It's just that teamwork, that camaraderie. So, and it teaches you kind of how to be selfless, because in the game of football, there's one ball and there's 12 guys on one side of the field, and so a lot of the times you don't get the glory, or you're not involved in it, but you're doing something to help make it work, right? No different than different roles in households or being a parent. There's just things and sacrifices that you have to make that sometimes go unnoticed that you wouldn't learn anywhere else outside of sports, I think. So it's probably the biggest thing is being resilient and just the opportunities that it has given our entire family. So
I think it's one of the things I played sports growing up too, and listening to you talk about this is also the ability to learn how to lose gracefully, like the ability to lose and the grief that comes with losing and being able to move forward, not just as an individual, but as a team, is something I think that you learn too, because you can really tell in a boardroom who has had to lose as a team before when something goes sideways, and who's learned those tough lessons. So where did the idea for Bring 'em Up Saskatchewan came from? Where did it come from?
Well, I have coached football for 25 years in Regina.
Tackle football.
Hey,
I have to clarify now. Flag's the whole thing.
Yeah, flag's great. So I've coached in the Pee Wee division. I've coached in the high school division.
What's the most fun for you?
Pee Wee, obviously. Yeah, the kids is the fun. But I've coached with the Regina Rams. I've coached with the Thunder. And so now that I have young children, I can't coach anymore. And I felt empty for a long time in that sense of giving back. So we have a Waldo family trip that we go on every year. So we were in Calgary a couple of years ago, and so we went to this park. And at this park, we had all our kids playing. I seen them. I believe they were either Sudanese or Somalian kids playing soccer. And so Paul's son and Peter's son, which are the same age, how old are they? 9? 8, 9?
They're 9 now.
They're
now. About to be 9. Yeah.
And so they wanted to play with these guys. So they started playing with these guys. And these kids, honestly, I'll be straightforward, they would have ran circles around our boys. Now, our boys they go to soccer camps, endless of money and
they
time.
They have the access to everything they want.
Endless of money that you guys and time that you spend on these kids. Yeah. But yet, these young boys were running around with their jeans on, no cleats,
Yeah.
no nothing, and they were so good. And I thought, oh my goodness, if those kids had 30% of the opportunities as our kids do, I just couldn't imagine where they'd be. And that stuck in my head, but that's not why Bring 'Em Up started. A girl by the name of Bree Burgess, who's a really, really good friend of mine, she's a teacher at Sheldon. She told me to come to her class to speak about sales, because I'm in sales, her grade 9 class. So I go there, I speak about sales, and I tell them my story like I just told you. But it wasn't a big deal. I never even thought. I just told the story.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Bree is just got this something stuck in her head that we got to do something. We got to do something. So she shows up to my office at BMW about a week later. She goes, here's the deal. We're going to start a camp in the summer, because a lot of these refugee kids don't have anything to do during the summertime, right? So we're going to start a camp, and what we're going to do is it's going to be a basketball camp. And I said, holy cow, Bree, okay, what do you need from me? She goes, money. I said, no problem. What do we need? She said, we probably need at least 10 grand. No problem. I'll deal with that. You deal with all that paperwork, you deal with everything. And then what I basically did was I got on my phone and just started texting every person that I have on my phone. We're having a gala on this date. You guys are coming. And I wasn't going to take no for an answer. So before you know it, we had a gala on May the 23rd, and we had 50 tables at this gala.
Amazing.
50 tables, and we ended up raising almost $65,000.
So that's several years of camp or several camps.
Oh, yeah.
Not only that, but I want to also focus on this. So I'm just going to make up a name. John, that goes to O'Neill High School. He's from Sudan. I'm just made up.
Yep.
So he's a great basketball player. Do you guys know how much it costs to play on a provincial basketball team?
I've heard, because one of my colleagues here, her son is playing elite level basketball. The trips, the touring, they're in the States, they're in Vancouver, they're here, they're there. He's gone just as much as he's here.
Okay. So the cost itself before travel is, I think, $1,300 to $1,400 before travel.
Right.
That's just to
Sign
use
up,
$1,300 just
registration.
to start up. And then you got your basketball runners, and then you got your jersey, and so on and on. So what I would like to do is, I'm going to twist it a little bit, is John, who is phenomenal but needs that little spark.
Yep.
That's where we come in, bring him up, and we will write a check for him in order for him to get to that next level. Or John might need to go to level 10 to go work out, some training. If he needs that to get him to the next level, bring him up, we'll do that. And that's my goal, is to have camps during this summer for the kids from Open Door Society. And then another focus is 1 or 2 athletes that need that little bit of, we're going to be there to help them.
Is cost the biggest barrier, Paul?
Absolutely. I mean,
It's not interest or in being introduced to the sports. It is just simply that barrier of, we came here, we don't have anything.
right. And they just never feel like they can attain it, right? So you just
And it's not a priority either, I'm sure.
For sure. BK talks about the kids that we saw on our trips, and that's how we would have been. That's how he would have been, right? So, luckily he had somebody that was able to help him. Otherwise, where would have he been? And if he's not where he's at, I'm not where I'm at, my brother's not where I'm at, and it permeates everywhere, right? So I think the cost is where it starts, and then the exposure to it. And I think nowadays, back then you didn't have like social media and all that stuff. Now kids kind of have access. They can see things. They can Google things. So the awareness, I think, is there. And I think parents are finally starting to come around to it slowly, but it's just the means. It's the cost.
When
right?
they're younger, how do you get them to games and practices if their parents don't have the means?
I'm glad you answered that. So that's another area too, is that the actual traveling. So what my goal is, little Johnny, who we will get him playing, and then the team has to come up with the traveling aspect of it, right? Just like, when we have, like, my little girl plays on a basketball team and I can't make it to a practice, my neighbor whose kids got on the same team will travel. Yeah. So the carpool. And that's where I think it helps. So our biggest thing is, 1, is get him involved. Number 2, come up with the finances. And then after that, everything will just fall in place.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the thought process behind it is when you're looking at some of these, these immigrant families, right? I mean, their parents are just getting here. They're scraping by, right? They're trying to make ends meet. I mean, and you can't blame them for thinking, gosh, I'm just trying to survive so I can keep the lights on and pay the food and stuff like that. Like the thought of them, being available to take their child, number one, right? Is impossible. You know what I mean? And then having to come up with the extra money to afford all the things that they're going to need. I mean, they don't even entertain it, right? It wouldn't make sense to them. So that's kind of, I think, where this is really going to help.
I'm Sam McKeag. Today we are talking about the barriers to sport and the impact that organizations can really have in making sure that kids get the support they need to get involved in sport. My guests are BK and Paul Waldo, who are with Bring 'em Up Saskatchewan, and Victoria Flores, who is with the Regina Open Door Society. Victoria, we haven't had a chance to talk about the impact of these programs, but things like Bring 'em Up Sask, what kind of impact are they having on people that you're working with every day?
I think it's a very meaningful impact. As they mentioned through their own stories, oftentimes when people are new to a country, usually the priority is not necessarily going to spend time and money to get kids into sports. But especially in the case of refugee families, there are even more barriers because you don't really plan to move to a new country when you come as a refugee. You had to, right? So oftentimes being able to access the resources, but beyond that, just even knowing about sports that are not familiar to you, as BK said, when he first moved here, all he knew was soccer, right? So having the support and then with that, the financial means to be able to continue on that is so incredibly important. We have a youth program at the Regina Open Door, and through that, I have had the same experience that both of them had, seeing kids and just we've taken them to downhill skiing trips or, other sports where I'm like, I hope that you have somebody that can support you through this because I know this kid's an athlete. I know this kid, and, that opens so many opportunities beyond the resilience that's built, the community, but things like scholarships, building a network that can, open so many doors in the future. So it is such an incredible part of community building. And I was just so excited when BK called because he called and he's like, hey, I'm planning this thing. And in my head, I'm like, that's amazing because we were planning some sports related programming. And for us, funding was also a barrier, right? Because there is only so much that we can do within our programming. And as he shared his ideas, I was getting excited. So we would go back and forth, and we can do this and we can do that. And what about that? And the story just grew to so much potential. And again, as he explained, a lot of the connections that he has growing up in the world of sports allowed us to be able to do something like this because not just everybody can pick up the phone and call a number of people and be like, let's do this. It's that has so much more impact beyond just the sport. So it's incredible.
Music is a great equalizer,
Absolutely.
Breaks down barriers between people regardless of the language. I think sports does that too in a way where once you understand the rules, it doesn't matter if you speak the same language, you're shooting for the same goal. But language is a problem when you're registering or trying to figure things out. How do places like the Open Door Society or Bring 'em Up Sask, how are they helping with the language barrier? Because a kid can come and say, Mom, I want to do this, or Dad, I want to do this. But if they don't understand what's expected of them or even just how to get through the registration papers, like that could be a barrier enough for people to say, this takes too much work for me, I'm not interested.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, as we develop all of this, we have the expertise and the connections and, all the processes down to build a lot of those barriers. We have interpreters through Open Door. We have staff that can be really supportive. For example, in schools, we have our settlement workers in schools that often bridge those barriers that help connect parents with teachers and explain the whole process of how different clubs, activities, academics works. So that's kind of part of what we do day to day. So this what Bring 'Em Up wants to accomplish and what Open Door does kind of just works really well together. And in terms of what you mentioned, like kids learning or, being the language being new, when I first moved to Canada as well, like English is not my first language. And a lot of the activities I got involved in helped so much with that.
Improve your language.
Yeah,
because you're talking with other kids.
Exactly. And I did a lot of sports growing up as well. So one of the ways I got involved and met a lot of friends was through being involved in sports and different clubs. And it makes such a difference in your ability to learn English faster because you need to understand what's going on. So
by necessity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it makes a huge difference, right? Because
if your language improves as a child, it'll help your parents' language improve as well.
Exactly. And you have kids who have more community, and it's a really great way to build friendships, and it again takes away from that possibility of kids being kind of lonely if they don't have much to do or they don't know what to do at home or how to get involved in school. So again, sports, music, all those activities are so incredibly important in building not just resilience but building community.
And it gets them off the blasted tablet.
Yes.
Okay. I want to bring in, we have a couple more guests that I want to get to. We know soccer is probably the most popular sport around the world. So perhaps it's not a surprise that Saskatchewan Soccer is working to make sure that more kids can find their way into soccer here when they get here. Jennifer Wood is the idea coordinator with Sask Soccer. She's been listening in. Jennifer, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
What is an idea coordinator?
It's a pretty cool idea. It's all about inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. It was a position that was created through some funding at Sask Sports, specifically to work on those strategies to bring, more awareness and more people to be able to access soccer.
Obviously, soccer is one of the lower barriers to entry sports. It's not as expensive. It's more accessible. You don't need as much very expensive equipment. But there are still barriers to getting newcomers into soccer. Can you tell me about those?
So we spend time speaking with community associations as well, like just learning from the community what they need. I have spoken with the Open Door Society. We do have a membership in Saskatoon as well who specifically worked with the Muslim community to create their entire soccer community. So just really trying our best to meet the needs. Translators was something that definitely came up with us, and looking at our member organizations to find people who would also be willing to meet with families who are interested in playing. We do have a couple funding programs because that is, soccer is on the cheaper side equipment-wise, but there's a lot of cost to indoor facilities. It is quite expensive in the indoor season. Trying to just, bring awareness and education. And like everyone said, sport is a beautiful platform. It's a way to bring the community together. It's a way for, kids to just have some fun, adults to have fun.
Okay. I'm wondering for things like World Cup of Soccer, where you get to play on your own country's team, what does that do in terms of bringing your own culture back to your Canadian life?
Yeah, so one of our local member organizations has ran that program every year, and I've been in there a couple times, and it's super loud and super exciting. I find the energy of soccer as a worldwide sport, it's exciting. So what I've noticed is, people build around their teams, they have their uniforms, wave their flags. It's a real community building event. Mm-hmm.
How are you seeing soccer across the province try to be more inclusive, not just, in Regina, as we just talked about?
Mm-hmm. Canada Soccer actually has some excellent programs. So last year they had done a free kicks program where they offered grant funding to our member organizations. So there were 5 members who had to partner, not had to, but the goal is to partner with organizations in your community to offer some free programming, summer programming, just trying to reduce costs so that these kids and adults are able to participate. And I know myself and Sask Soccer, we're looking to do a similar program this summer. So the member organizations don't just do the programming on their own. They do partner with the local associations to provide what the communities need.
Is there an example of one of those organizations that you want to tell me about that's a little, just to give people a sense of what they're doing? Maybe the Muslim Girls Soccer Camp?
Yeah, so Forza Soccer Academy was started in Saskatoon, and we partnered with them last summer at our soccer day in Saskatchewan to provide just an environment for girls to come out. We had female leaders, and it was a closed environment for some of those younger females in the Muslim community who are only able to be in a female environment. So just trying to make that as comfortable as possible. We had about 50 girls that attended that, and then partnered them with Forza to continue programming if they had wanted to play.
I love that because it's not just making sport more inclusive based on culture, but also based on gender. There's always room for more girls in sports. Is there anything else you want to touch on before I move on to, we go from the pitch to the rink?
I'm really looking forward to talking to Paul and BK, that's for sure. Improving opportunities and just getting more people involved.
Well, they've got giant smiles on their face, so you can bet. And BK has already said he doesn't take no for an answer, so I look forward to eavesdropping on that conversation. Jennifer, thanks so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
That's Jennifer Wood. She's the idea coordinator with Sask Soccer. Let's go from the pitch to the rink. Ice sports are not known for being as widely accessible, and ringette is no exception, and that's why Sask Ringette has created a program to introduce new Canadians to the sport and reduce some of the barriers to getting young athletes interested in the game. Carrie Manzuk is with Ringette Saskatchewan. She's been listening in. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you for having me.
What stands out from what you've heard in this conversation so far?
One thing that stands out is we are on the same line. So what we saw, we are a much smaller sport than soccer, and we are very Canadian. So what we've seen is new Canadians, they don't know what ringette is. They've seen hockey, they've seen skating, but never seen ringette. So we're trying to introduce it to a new group, a new community, and just get them involved.
I imagine for a newcomer who's heard of hockey or learns about hockey, ringette would probably seem very strange because you're missing part of the stick.
Definitely, yeah.
So you applied for a grant through Sask Sport to increase diversity in ringette. What are you finding out about who participates?
So our program actually started back in 2022. We started with a gym ringette program, just an easier way to get these kids involved, get them to learn the sport. That transitioned into a guide on what is gym ringette that we've translated into 4 different languages. And then now we're transitioning these kids onto the ice. We did that this past winter, and we're finding that they're so interested. They're really good at the sport. It's just the skating skills we need to work on.
That is relatable. What are some of the biggest barriers to entry that you're finding? You've got the information, you're sharing it with people, but what are some of the barriers that are stopping the buy-in?
Like everyone else has said, it's cost. Ringette is an ice sport. Ice is expensive. We also wear a lot of equipment, especially like skates are very expensive, helmets, that's very expensive. So we're trying to adapt our sport a little bit, make it a little bit cheaper. Maybe we just have a ringette drop-in where you just need to bring a pair of skates and a helmet. Or we do lots of stuff in the gym or even outside just to reduce those cost barriers, get them involved with things they already have.
So what is the goal with the grant that you accessed?
Our goal is just to get more people involved in our great sport. We want to tap into that new community, those new Canadians, and get them involved in a truly Canadian sport.
So who did you partner with?
We started partnering with the Moose Jaw Multicultural Council. That was with our gym program. And then through that, we got another grant from the Canadian Parks and Rec Association just to continue our program. And now through SaskSport and our Sparks Idea Grant, we've got even more funding.
Well, that's really good. So it's going over well.
It's phenomenal. We started with about 12 kids, and now we see 30 at our ice sessions.
Oh, that's great. What kind of adjustment is it going from a gym to ice other than the whole slippery, folly down part?
It's actually not that big of an adjustment because our sport is non-contact. Running around in a gym is no problem. We find that it's the markings on the gym because our ringette lines on the ice are a little different than hockey, but then you get into a gym and there's soccer and basketball and different kinds of lines. So that's where we have to adapt a little bit. But we're finding that kids, they jump right in. They pick it up very quickly.
Where do you think there's room for improvement when it comes to making winter sports more accessible to newcomers? I know for a lot of people that are coming from hot countries, the idea of going anywhere cold by choice is one that takes some adjustment.
Definitely. And like I also said, it's cost, it's reducing those barriers. And we see a lot of, not pushback, but hockey's big. So hockey gets lots of the ice time. So it's allowing newer sports, newer communities, newer groups into those ice times, into these rinks, just to give us a chance.
Are you finding that people are sticking with it? As you were saying, you're getting up to 30 showing up. Are people staying for the long haul and it's just continuing to grow?
Absolutely. And we're seeing lots of these kids, they're making friends. So they want to come. They invite their brothers and sisters. We get more and more kids every time we have a session.
A full family affair.
Absolutely.
Carrie, thanks so much for telling us about it today.
Thank you.
Carrie Manzek is with Ringette Saskatchewan. Today, we are talking about sports, newcomers, and barriers to sport. I want to bring BK and Paul Waldew back into this. As you're listening, BK, to what these organizations in the province are doing, how important is it, not just for organizations, but for people who are from here to be involved in getting newcomers involved and making that effort?
Good question again. Mostly the parents of newcomers, how do you get them to believe in sports is the one question, right? And it's tough for them. Like Paul said earlier, they're busy putting food on the table. That's the last thing that they need to worry is about this sort of thing. Yeah. So I think like myself and other refugees that have been around for a long period of time, that's where we need the help. When the newcomers come in, Open Door Society, I think one of the biggest things that we should maybe with Open Door is, hey, families, this is what sports do for you, and on and on and on.
How do you quantify that in a way that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Because so much of when you come here and you're trying so hard to make money, and time is money, so how do you convince them that the investment is worth the reward?
Examples. So you'll have to set examples. So here's Paul Waldew. He's a refugee, or, BK Waldew's a refugee, and sports paid for his schooling. Mm-hmm. Sports paid for his, just my positive attitude comes from sports. So I think what we have to do is set an example and show them that, hey, this is a refugee that came in 1983 and look what he did. And it was because of sports is where he is. Mm-hmm. And I think parents will see that. So when I did that, when I was at that refugee camp, on Saturday, what was that, Victoria? I seen a lot of these refugee mom and dads that probably it has included in what sports is doing. Mm-hmm. I think it's just by setting examples as one. Number two, I think it's not only sports, but I think coaching and refereeing is big. Mm-hmm. So I need some refugees that have soccer experience. If they don't want to play soccer, maybe get into refereeing. Mm-hmm. Or get into coaching.
Looks great on the resume,
doesn't it? But here's an individual from Ethiopia. He doesn't want to play soccer, but he wants to coach. How easy is that for him to talk to the parents and saying this is what we need? So it's not only playing sports. I think we have to bring them up. I think we should be involved with it's actually getting the refugees to also ref and coach. Mm-hmm. Put them in coaching clinics. Mm-hmm. Put them in reffing clinics. I think that would help.
How much does representation matter? Your family coming over, you're not, you were born in Canada, right. You were not born in Canada, but having that representation saying, I came here, I did this built this life for our family. How much does being that representative of that matter to other newcomers in seeing that?
Well, I think it's everything, because that's when you get comfortable, right? Because you have familiarity, and it's, somebody that looks like you is able to do something that you potentially want to do. And I think that's where it starts. So like BK was saying, almost being ambassadors, right? But it starts with the people who have done it already, that have been here and come from those families and have been able to set that example. I think that's probably the most important thing. And the other thing too is, like BK said, our parents are so used to hammering away on education. But once they realize that, an education can be paid for through sports, mm-hmm. right? And through certain elements that way. I think it's just getting the realization across. But I think having familiarity with people is probably what makes it more comforting and allows people to want to go pursue it.
What about being that representation in the CFL? Because you are a Canadian-born, coming from a refugee family. You don't see a lot of that in the CFL. There's a lot of Americans who've been through a lot of stories, but none quite have the stories. There's not as many that have the stories that you do.
No, I think I'm the first and only I would have been the first and only CFL professional. I think there was the guy who played in the NFL shortly after. And even when I started to come on the scene, even early in my career, I started to get a lot of phone calls, even from my parents' friends who had kids who, wanted to come to games now when they were starting to be, intrigued with the sport, right? So I think that is really important. Like I said, having representation and seeing that somebody else can do it or has done it.
Is that a lot of pressure on you, though?
Pressure is a privilege. Pressure is a privilege. It's,
I can tell you've been well coached.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
Because you spoke about parents going to games and things like that. And I was just speaking to somebody from a hockey team, and when you see not only your kids or you getting involved in sports, when you see communities more represented in these spaces that are usually not, you have more people interested in that sport. So that grows that community itself. So I feel like it's a positive all around, not just for those who are playing the sports or the families, and beyond the scholarships and the community building, especially when you have growing communities who are not familiar with certain sports, like Ringette, for example.
Someone to cheer for.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. It's like now you have a whole community that otherwise would have maybe just only thought about soccer, let's say, right? But now they're like, oh, Ringette's a thing. My kid's playing Ringette. My cousin's playing Ringette. Or all these communities now not only become aware of these new activities, but also become perhaps fans, supporters.
Totally.
Not only just playing, what BK said, referees, coaches, team managers, it's a whole ecosystem.
I think of that in the way that I watched the Seattle Kraken now with Jessica Campbell being from Saskatchewan.
Yeah, totally.
Female coach from Saskatchewan coaching in the NHL, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a little more interest in what's going on behind the bench because you see someone
100%
who you recognize as one of your own, as someone from the province who's doing something cool.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. It grows the community.
point.
It's not just playing. It's all of the aspects.
But that part of representation really makes that difference.
Okay. On the carpool front, how are you at the Open Door Society, how are you guys navigating that when it comes to getting kids and parents who maybe want to go watch, who may not have the transportation? How are you guys navigating that?
It depends on the activity. So oftentimes, if it's a large enough group, and oftentimes funding is to we will get buses and take a bus of people. Oftentimes we use public transit, which is really great as well. So we meet at the office, or we have a meeting point, and we'll take public transit together. So it all is kind of depending on what the activity is. But as we're able to get more funding, as activities increases, we're able to figure out those things, whether it's, okay, we just need a few kids to get there. So that might be a taxi voucher, that might be public transit, that might be renting a whole bus. So always figuring out what the need is and how do we meet that need appropriately.
Okay, BK, Paul, I'm going to give last words to you. What do you need from this province? What do you need? How do we support? Because this is so great, and it's great. So what do you need? What do you need from people? And not just money, but what do you need?
So bring them up. What do you
need? What do you need?
Well, money is the number one factor. Yes, we need money. And what I want is people to believe. They got to believe in us. And it's going to take probably a couple of years. This is our first year. Honestly, when I thought of this gala idea, I was hoping to get 25 tables. And we ended up with 50 tables. All right. So what I need is to believe and bring him up and help us with funds. Once we do that, I think everything else will just fall in play because we're so lucky and fortunate to be working with the Open Door Society. That's the tough part is getting everything organized. If we can get some funds from the community and the community believes in what we're doing, and then I tell you something, this is going to grow, and hopefully Bring 'em Up will be, I'll be long done, and hopefully my daughter and them continue taking this on, right? Is my
what
goal.
about, I mean, to be, I'm going to use the in this economy.
Right.
In this economy, if you don't have funds, but they do believe in you, how can they contribute? Is it reach out to the Open Door Society? Is it how can you help if you don't have the money to help?
Awesome. Coaching, volunteering your time. You know, we have tons of camps that are going to be through the Open Door Society, coaching, volunteering your time. And again, just believe. I'm telling you, once we believe in this, everything will fall in play. My coach used to say, don't care what the score is. At the end of the day, the score will deal itself.
Figure itself.
Okay? Just as long as you believe and you just try, everything will fall in place.
Victoria, anything you want to add to that? Anything from your side on the Open Door Society?
As you said, things like volunteering, oftentimes supporting for teachers, for neighbors, for parents whose kids might have teammates who are newcomers. Just support those communities and, be advocates for those who might need a little bit more time, more support. Volunteering and getting involved with Open Door is always, a great thing because, as you said, it's not always money, but if you speak another language, if you're going to become an interpreter, if you want to volunteer with a homework help club, we have a number of ways that we support people, and it is so impactful. But I think that belief in community building and all of us working together to make sure our neighbors and their kids and the families are doing as well as we are creates such positive impact that just resonates with everyone. And I think that's so important.
You guys have me all jacked up. I'm all excited about this. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. I can't believe that you had to literally crawl through the dark in a camel and everything, and you're here doing these wonderful things and giving back.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah,
so my guests today, BK and Paul Waldew, they are involved in Bring 'em Up Sask. You can Google it. I'm sure they will be happy to have your time and money. And Victoria Flores with the Regina Open Door Society.